Every week, there's a new powder or patch or monitor or supplement promising to help you live longer and look younger and to optimize your health. But it can be all confusing. So today, Dr. Priya Patel with Feminology MD is here to break down the 5 biggest wellness trends of 2026 so we can get right even in the second half of the year. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So glad to have you here. So let's start with one of the biggest wellness trends of 2026, the protein and the creatine and the collagen. Are they actually worth the hype as far as what it is portrayed on social media?
Yes, so I would say in short, yes, but let's unpack that a little bit because that is a very complex question. Let's start with protein, which I think is the most well-studied, and we have infinite data on the value of protein. We know we need protein to maintain and grow our muscle, which is vital for metabolic function. We know we need protein for hormone and immune function. We need protein to maintain our bones. We need protein. How much protein do we need?
Right.
So studies suggest that adequate protein or ideal protein intake is about 0.55 to 0.7 grams of protein per pound daily. Wow. So if you take an average 120 to 130 pound, let's use a female, they probably need about roughly about 80 grams of protein a day.
A day, okay.
But adequate protein intake is equally important to distribution throughout the day. So you don't want to just pack it all into one meal.
Right.
You want to try to break it up into about 25 to 35 grams of protein per meal, ideally 3 meals throughout the day.
Interesting.
Second, let's talk a little bit about creatine.
What is creatine?
So creatine is actually is a building block basically of ATP.
Okay.
Right? So it's a source of cellular fuel. So that's why creatine is really valuable for exercise and to sort of enhance exercise capacity and also to help build and maintain muscle.
So it's like a sports drink, but for working out, and it's healthy.
It's a little bit of a performance drink.
There you go.
Or a performance supplement.
Yeah.
But there's actually data to back it up.
Okay.
And there's some newer evolving data that there may be some benefit in terms of cognitive function, which who doesn't need that?
We all need that indeed.
So that's a little more evolving, but the exercise and muscle enhancing data is very clear and there.
Can I ask you a question? Just back up for 2
Yes.
seconds. Make it as clear as possible for me. ATP. What's that?
So adenosine, basically it's cellular fuel.
You was about to give me the science word
let's
for
just break it down. It's basically energy for the body.
I love.
So every single cell in your body needs energy. It's gasoline.
This is how we work. This is how we
work.
move.
Absolutely.
Okay. Collagen. I know it's good for the skin. Am I right?
Yes. So
okay.
there's I would say collagen of the 3 is the one we know the least about, but there's still pretty good data that it's good for skin. We think it improves skin elasticity, hydrates the skin, and then some data that it may also potentially be beneficial for exercise and muscle mass and things like that.
Interesting. Okay, so another huge wellness trend is testing and balancing your cortisol, which everyone seems to think that their cortisol is high. Is that
Yes.
true? What does that actually look like? And what does balancing it look like in an everyday space?
So I think it's gotten a little bit convoluted along the way in terms of what cortisol is. Cortisol is a natural hormone that we all have. It spikes in the morning and then typically lowers throughout the day. That is normal. But there is what's considered more typical or normal ranges. So everyone's like, oh, I'm stressed, I must have high cortisol. But that's a bit of a misnomer because it's thought now to sort of blame everything, right? Mid-abdominal weight gain, fatigue, poor sleep, all the things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be a source of it, but often changes in cortisol are normal.
So it's a scapegoat.
It's become a little bit of a scapegoat. So I think certainly, if stress is high, it's something to have evaluated, but it's not always cortisol. There's probably 100 different other things happening in the body that you need to consider as well.
Stop using that as an excuse, y'all, okay? We can't use it anymore. She just gave us the truth and the science behind it, so now we can't. Okay, what about continuous glucose monitors? They are everywhere right now. What exactly do they measure, and should everyone actually be using one?
So the simple answer to that is not necessarily no. Obviously for diabetics, it's a really valuable tool to measure their glucose. They need that to check their sugars. For the average healthy individual, it can be an interesting experiment basically to monitor your glucose continuously for a couple weeks. It can give you an idea of how your body responds to certain foods, what your sugar does in response to exercise, etc. With that said, sometimes it can be a little overinterpreted because normal spikes and drops are normal.
Okay.
That is physiological, that is healthy. No one's going to have a flat glucose.
We get to
all day long.
self-diagnose when we start seeing spikes.
But I do think it can be valuable to sort of help optimize metabolic function if you realize that certain foods are maybe spiking your glucose a little too much.
Wow, wow. Okay, you guys, we can't even get to all of the trends because we just don't have enough time, and that's just how many there are out there. But because there's so many wellness trends that are constantly coming out, how do people know what's actually for them?
Truthfully, I think obviously educating yourself is education is
biggest
power.
thing, yeah.
But beyond that is really seeking a professional who can really discuss what's happening in your body with you, get more data, and then identify what actually is correct for you. Because it can be overwhelming out there.
So outside of the trends, what are we thinking? Biggest piece of advice to continue healthy aging without leaning into all of the trends that are going on social media?
Not to be a broken record, all the wellness trends are interesting and I think evolving and have lots of benefit. But the basics are so important. Adequate sleep, adequate hydration, adequate protein intake distributed throughout the day, and that translates into adequate nutrient intake, maintaining, controlling stress.
Yeah.
Exercise.
All the things we hear about.
All the normal things.
Every time we go to the
doctor. But I think those are, at the end of the day, 100% the most valuable. So if you have to prioritize, focus on the basics. Don't get caught up in all the newer things because they're never going to replace the fundamentals.
I did hear one trend in there, though, that was protein. So she did point that one out. Maybe that's the one you start with and you focus on.
Yes.
Tell us where we can find you, my girl.
Absolutely. So our website is www.feminologymd.com, or our office phone number is 469-242-6292.
We are taking better care of ourselves in the second half of 2026. Great information. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Doctor.
so much for having me.